From the South Carolina School Boards Association, I'm Scott Price, SCSBA Executive Director, and welcome to the Voice of School Boards. It's in the complex world of public education that school board members find themselves squarely at the forefront. From the loftiness of policy development and having a vision for schools to the rudiments of budget developing and building classrooms, school board members are tasked with addressing the challenges and inequities in education. Oftentimes, in the process of doing so, school board members' voices and that of other local leaders become a whisper. The goal of this podcast is to educate, amplify, and engage in a civil discourse on where we've been in education, where we are now, and where we hope to go in the future. Along the way, we'll meet some very interesting people and also have a little fun. Joining us today on the Voice of School Boards is Dr. Christie Palladino, who has been named the 2027 South Carolina Teacher of the Year. Dr. Palladino teaches at Aiken County Career and Technology Center, where she leads the biomedical science program. First of all, congratulations to you for being named South Carolina Teacher of the Year for 2027. What a phenomenal achievement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
We're delighted to have you with that designation and also delighted to have you today. So welcome to the Voice of School Boards.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about what you felt. It's like we were just talking before the recording began and about just the fanfare, the hundreds of people that were there, the crowds, the pomp and the circumstance, the governor, all of that. Tell me how that felt for you going into that. I mean, because you have a day full of activities, right?
Yes. It was, a little bewildering, to be honest. I mean, as a teacher, we're often sitting in our classrooms. It's fairly predictable from day to day. There's always a little bit of things here and there. And we're used to celebrations during Teacher Appreciation Week, but I think to have a whole day devoted to us as teachers, it was just really amazing. And we started out with a breakfast in downtown Columbia sponsored by Bojangles. And then from there, we went to the State House and were recognized in both chambers of the House. And that was a really unique experience. I don't think I had been to the State House since elementary school, probably on a field trip.
And probably won't be going back anytime soon, except for...
Right. Yeah, it's not a place you find educators all that often. And then from there, went over to the governor's mansion, and just every little detail was thought out. I mean, from just the beauty of the tables and my family being able to be there. They even had a photo booth where there's an artist who takes a picture of every district teacher of the year with their guest and then does a watercolor painting from the photo. The food, just all the recognition. I think as teachers, we tend to hold on to every little note, every little piece of things that are encouraging to us. And to have a whole day devoted to us, that was pretty amazing. And also, I mean, we're typically not the people who we don't like a lot of fanfare around us, but it's good for us sometimes. And we talk about that actually in our state teacher forum, how it is good for us to say, we deserve some recognition and we are leaders, and to actually have to own that a little bit. And so I think it was really the perfect event for that.
What happened afterwards?
That was a whirlwind. As soon as the announcement was made, I was in pretty much a state of shock. And then right away, you're up on stage getting the award. Then right away, you're at the podium speaking to the group that was there. And then pictures and pictures and more pictures. And after that, got to meet the governor and sit down in the governor's mansion. Things you definitely don't think you'll have the chance to do. And then we followed up with a press conference with the state superintendent of education and the governor. And then there's the car, getting to sit in the BMW and going through all the features, and then lots more pictures and more video and just capturing all of that. So quite a busy day, but for obviously a really happy reason.
Well, you got to do more than just sit in the BMW. I imagine, hopefully you drove that home.
I did. I was very thankful. My parents and my daughter and I had carpooled to Columbia that day. So I was very thankful that we didn't have multiple cars with us, but I was certainly going to drive the car home. Actually, I was on I-20 driving back and heard someone honk next to me. I looked over and it was one of the State Department of Education communications staff, and that had come to do one of the videos as part of the application process. And she waved at me and I waved back. It's like, oh, this is so nice. And then I turned and I looked and I was in the right-hand lane of I-20 doing about 45 miles an hour in the middle of Columbia. And I thought to myself, oh goodness, I was so scared being in this brand new car. I thought I probably need to speed up a little bit. Yeah, it's a tremendous gift.
I'm going to refer to this as, is there a handler or somebody that has sat you down or calls you every day and says, here's your schedule? And I mean, how does that work?
Sure. We haven't quite gotten to that point just yet. I will technically, I guess, become the State Teacher of the Year on August the 1st.
Okay,
so
that was a question.
Current Teacher of the Year, Corey Beatonbow, is still getting most of those things right now. But I will say I have been flooded with so much support. So I have a dedicated contact of the State Department of Education. The former Teachers of the Year for the state are just such a tight group and have all reached out to me. Corey has been a fantastic asset to me already, sharing what his journey has been like, how that worked, all the pieces from, just how much gas you use and how to how you schedule events. And then pretty much the State Department of Education mostly manages the schedule, and people will reach out to me through my State Department email, from what I understand. But it's already begun. Lots of requests, lots of things. I have my first kind of official education event on the calendar, and that's exciting. So it really does. It starts very quickly. I've got a new planner, several desktop calendars in various places, but also a lot of support.
Well, tell me about your background. Tell me about, because you've been teaching what, for about 12 years?
12 years. Yeah, this is year 12.
Okay. But you're not a teacher you're a obstetrician, gynecologist, and a health science education researcher. How did you make this transition? What did you just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be a teacher? Or how did that work for you?
It was a journey. And at times it seemed like, do these pieces really fit together? But when I look back at it, they really did. I got into medicine because I was interested in service. I'm the daughter of a public health nurse who had a 20-plus year career with DHEC. My dad is a second career high school science teacher. And I just grew up in that environment, and I knew that I wanted to be involved in service. I loved science, and that kind of naturally funneled me into medical school. I love being an OBGYN. I still have an active license, even though I don't practice clinically anymore. Loved my patients, but really early on, like as early as my residency training, I just found this spark teaching students. I had medical students who would be rotating with me and just teaching them, sharing what we were doing, why we were doing that, kind of guiding them through that practice. OBGYN can be a scary specialty for some students, particular because it's a very intimate type of specialty, and it takes a special rapport with patients. And so I felt like that was an area where I could really take time with students and help them gain skills, be empathic. And so towards the end of my residency, I became very interested in how we were treating depression during pregnancy as OBGYNs. And that led me into a research fellowship after I finished residency. And what I really saw, because to be honest, at first, it was really easy to say, goodness, why aren't we doing a better job as OBs? We should be doing a better job taking care of our patients who have depression, who have anxiety. And then as I started doing my research and I started surveying OBGYNs and I started visiting clinics and doing observations, what I found was, and I had to admit this myself as well, is we weren't trained to do that. It just wasn't a part of, and not only were we not given kind of the pieces in training, but it just wasn't really a sense of who we were or who we are as a profession. And that led to researching how do we train healthcare providers and how do we motivate providers who are already in a very busy profession where time is of the essence. We know we have to be lifelong learners, but then how do we really put a new piece on top of that? Now you really need to be addressing this issue. Yeah. How do we do that? And that led me into researching how do we train providers. And that led to a job as an educational researcher at the Medical College of Georgia, where I was for 4 years, still teaching medical students, teaching the evidence-based medicine course and the teaching. It was just, that was the passion. Every time I stepped into the classroom or every time I stepped into our standardized patient rooms to teach the pelvic exam to students, that's just where I found my calling. And I eventually said, if I really enjoy this so much, why don't I do it full time? And so I started pursuing alternative routes of certification to teaching. And then
Does South Carolina make that easy?
Actually, South Carolina did make that easy. I went through a program called the PACE program, which is Program for Alternative Certification for Educators. And there are numerous alternative certification pathways now compared to then. That was a very structured process. I knew what was expected of me. There was coursework that I did along, with a cohort of individuals. I had a designated mentor through that program. I had to take some master's coursework through that program. And I really appreciated it because I didn't have a background in curriculum. I didn't have I had done a lot of assessment work, but I needed that. And so I think the pieces I gained during that time of how to dissect standards and decide what's most important, how to plan lessons that'll actually get students engaged around the content, how do I assess them fairly? That's what I got through that. Yeah.
Well, and you're talking too about you're transitioning to a whole different level of kid. I mean, what I'm saying? Whole different level of student. And you're at the point where they don't know maybe yet what they want to do.
Yes.
That's
I love that.
It's got to be crazy to be in that position to where you're influencing what kids are going to do for perhaps the rest of their life.
Yes, I don't take that responsibility lightly. There is a lot of joy in it. There is a lot of joy in seeing a student sit down to a microscope and sit back and say, oh my gosh, look at that. Or to see them draw blood for the first time. And just the joy in their eyes to see. I mean, we geek out in my classroom because that's what we do. We're scientists, but to grow bacteria and to be mesmerized by that, things that they just never had the opportunity to do and realize I could do this as a career. So it's exciting, but it is also, there's a lot of responsibility.
Describe to me, and you may have just done this, but I'm gonna structure my question a little better. Tell me about your biomedical science program, and then I want to hear about the capstone course, the bioimmersive capstone course.
Absolutely. So we are now in year 5 of our program. Our program's a 2-year program. We're located at the Aiken County Career and Technology Center. So that means we feed in from all of the district's high schools. During the first year of the program, our students complete 3 courses with Project Lead the Way, which is a national curriculum designer for STEM. And they have a biomedical science program. And during those courses, students get exposed to different common laboratory techniques in biomedical science, everything from forensic science. So we have a case where there's a body on the floor. It's not a real body, but we treat it as a real body. So everything from forensics to they have a patient who might have a genetic disorder and their family is concerned. What's the risk? How did this, How is this inherited? There's an outbreak case that they solve in those courses. Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything is tied. It's all problem-based learning. Everything is tied to a real case. So the students really get invested in the work that they're doing. And that really gives them a nice introduction to, because it's such a broad area. I mean, biomedical science touches on clinical laboratory science. So if you're thinking, okay, working in the hospital lab and running those tests, to research. So are we researching, the next treatment for something? Are we researching, how to develop the next vaccine? To actually producing biomedical products. So we've got biomanufacturers right down the road from us making insulin, among other things.
Yeah.
And so they get exposed to a nice variety, and they really build a core skill set. And then as they progress through that year, if they get to the point and they say, this really is something I find, interesting, and I really think I want to pursue this potentially as a career or as content that's related to my career, then they can apply to come back for the capstone program.
Okay. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned Georgia. I think, according to your bio, you've been in several states. Tell me about your family and your life and how you got to where you are right now. And I know we've talked a little bit about that, but I want to hear about your family, because I imagine that with most families, it's an investment in terms of the career that we choose. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. I grew up in Barnwell County, South Carolina, in Williston, small town, about 3,000 people.
Okay.
Had a wonderful upbringing. My parents, very devoted parents, very interested in our education. My dad was on the school board in Williston for many years. Graduated from Williston Elko in 1995. Had a tremendous experience as a high school student. Wonderful teachers. I left there not only, I guess, loving learning, but feeling as if I could do it, and that it didn't necessarily matter what town I grew up in, but that I really could take on, the challenges of that time going to medical, thinking about a future in medicine. So from Williston, which was just a wonderfully tight, supportive community. I just couldn't have asked to have grown up in a better environment as a kid. When I left Williston, I was looking for a similar small, supportive environment for college, and that led me to Davidson College outside of Charlotte. Had a great experience at Davidson. At the time, my father was also going back to school to become a teacher. So he decided to go back to college. And even the next of my brothers started college. So at one point in time, we had 3 of us in college, and then my mom working as a public health nurse. And so I think that it does show how committed my parents were to supporting our journeys. That even though there was a lot going on for them at the time, we made it work. And then I actually took a year off from college, worked in Charlotte for an ophthalmologist's office. Just wanted to kind of step back from being a student for a little bit and see a little bit of day-to-day practice. And then went down to MUSC in Charleston, where I did medical school, got my MD, and thought OBGYN would be the last specialty I would choose. Fully convinced when I went into medical school I was going to be a private practice pediatrician for the rest of my life. And I don't know if it was my mom's public health experience rubbing off on me, but just found a real love for obstetrics and gynecology and women's health and prevention. And that led me to University of Florida. So then you start doing the training hop, as we all say, where I did my residency. And then that led me to University of Michigan for that research fellowship. And then from there, I got a job on faculty at the Medical College of Georgia. And so that was the last place where I was before becoming a teacher. My parents were so supportive the entire time. I think it could be really easy because so much time gets put in. There's, of course there's the money, but I think it's just the time and the tears of watching, your child go through just really tough programs and hearing that from them, and then to make a transition that seems like, oh my gosh, a little out of left field. I think to them it wasn't as surprising as it seems like it would have been, because they had seen me through that whole process. Yeah, I remember when I first started teaching, I'd call my dad on the way home every day and pick his brain about, how he dealt with things in the classroom, and we would kind of share thoughts, and they really have. They've been there for me the whole way, and wonderful. I've been very fortunate for that.
Well, so shifting gears a little bit, you said you officially pick up the mantle August 1st. Tell me what you are, basically the ambassador, 64,000 educators, teachers in our state. And what is your platform going to be in the next year? And what are you going to be? What is your message that you're going to have when you're talking to either teachers or to people, legislative leaders, et cetera, about teachers?
Absolutely. My platform is built on teaching to serve and learning through service. And that's something that really has become a central component of my curriculum and my program, and has really, I think, also sustained me as an educator, is remembering that at the end of the day, we are here to serve our students. And that doesn't mean we're making it easy for students. In fact, sometimes it's quite the opposite. But that what we do is really intended to help them succeed. Where are they going after they leave my classroom? And I think that happens at every level. How do I make them successful when they step into first grade? How do I make them successful when they make the jump to high school? How are they going to be successful when they leave my program and maybe they step right into a job or they step into college? And just reminding ourselves that that's what we're here to do. And for me, one of the key ways of doing that has been service-based learning for students, letting students see that as well about them. So I'm modeling that as an educator, my role is to serve you in this way. What is your role going to be? How are you going to serve someone with the content that you're learning? And this did not occur naturally to me. It was actually 2 students in the first year of our program who looked at me and said, Dr. P, why don't we take the show on the road? And I was thinking, what do you mean? And they said, we are getting to do things that we never thought we'd be able to do. Why have we had to wait so long until we've had these chances? And there are many reasons for that. I mean, what we do is very resource intensive. It takes a lot of money. But can we share that with other students so that they see that this is a possibility, that you can have a career, you can actually do science, that science isn't copying down notes, and that they can actually do this. And we started by just putting things in the back of my Subaru and going to career fairs, various places, and, just very homegrown. And then over the past 5 years, that has now become the central component of particularly our capstone program. Our students run a service learning enterprise, which is providing STEM outreach labs to K through 12 students throughout our district. And they develop those labs, they develop the lesson plans, they deliver the labs. They are doing the work. I'm the facilitator. And I think what I have learned through that as a teacher is to let the students, to let them take the lead. And it forces them to think about, what am I going to do with what I'm learning? How am I going to use this to serve someone else? And it shows them that what they're learning has importance, that it matters. It gives them some skin in the game. It gives them autonomy. They get to make decisions. It shows them that what they're doing is relevant, that people care. Because when they go to a school and they help a 6th grader pluck their hair out and put it on a microscope slide and look at it under the microscope, and that kid just lights up, they can create a connection with those kids that I just can't do, because those kids look at them and say, wow, you look a lot like me. You're not that, they're not that far apart in age. Maybe they even went to their elementary school. And those kids look at them, and my students, they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, Dr. P, they asked me how much money I make in a year. Like, they think I'm, out in the workforce. I'm like, well, but because you're showing them what you know. And you are providing, look at that. Look at what you're giving to them. And then they take it into their rotations at the hospital, which can be so daunting, but they're used to thinking of, how am I going to serve others with what I've learned? And so then they go in the hospital and they're willing to streak a plate, when they're asked to in microbiology, and they're willing to get over those fears of, oh, I'm going to draw now this patient's blood that I've never met, before, because they believe they can do it. And so I think that is really going to be the heart of my message. And I think it's easy as a career and technical education teacher to say, we're going to do this, because somewhat naturally what we teach is directly relevant to the workforce. But we all have that in our content. And so I want to see those conversations, start to happen across disciplines. How do we get career and technical education into the conversation? Because everybody's teaching something that their students can take and can serve someone else with. Maybe it's plotting out the school garden. Maybe it's creating a graphic novel, a Shakespearean play that's going to get kids excited about something that maybe they otherwise wouldn't be. Maybe it's going to be, a t-shirt fundraiser and managing inventory with the skills that you got in your computer science class. We have a school nearby that they've actually created an entire business model within their middle school of they're making shirts and selling shirts. And it's not just for their school. It's, our career center recently placed an order with them for one of our camps to make shirts. And you just think, how involved that could involve kids across all the content areas. So that's really going to be my message to teachers, is looking across at one another and seeing how we can collaborate to find those pieces in the curriculum that really give meaning to students and result in a product. And then, of course, it's going to take support. So that's going to take some infrastructure. That's going to take a little change in the mindset of how we do professional development and not sitting in our silos. It takes resources to do what we do with our outreach program. But I've been fortunate because we were able to make that argument to our district leadership. And so that money that pours into this program now not only serves the 40 kids that are in either year of our program, it's serving thousands of students around the district. And so being able to show districts that putting in that kind of investment can be explosive and really reach a lot of kids.
Well,
Sorry.
That's how you kind of answered my next question. And that's if you're sitting in a room, 300-400 school board members, what's your message to them? What are you going to tell them about what you do and what teaching does and what they need to do?
Yeah, and this is not a cop-out answer, but I'm going to have my students stand up and talk. And that's when people actually listen the most. Right. I'm going to have them share what they've done, what it's meant to them, how it's impacting what they plan to do when they leave this school district. That's the first thing I'm going to do, is have them share that message. And because I think that's the heart of it. Right. That's the point of doing what we do. And I can put the data up. I can show how my students' self-confidence and their skill set is significantly higher the more they participate in outreach. I can put a lot of numbers up there. I can put our certification rates up there, but I can't share the meaning that the students can. But I think at the same time, it is important to back that up with data. So
Wow.
I can show them these kids are passing certification exams that are at the career and college level. And we are having pass rates higher than school programs. And I think a lot of that is because of the motivation that kids get by having service at the center of what they're learning. It is not,
Okay.
Dr. P, why are we learning this today? It's we're learning this today because we're going to do this with it. And that just becomes, that's always the question. Why are we doing this? And if we can't answer that, then the kids shut down. And I think as educators, we often shut down when we lose that why. That's what we need to hold on to. So being able to, I think sometimes, and I can put the theory up behind this. I mean, there's plenty of research to support the effectiveness of service-based learning. There's plenty of motivational research to show why it works. So we can back it up with that, and I can show them these actual outcomes. But I still think ultimately it comes down to the stories those kids share, and the stories of the kids who have been in the seat of receiving that. So we have our first student now who was one of our campers, our very first year, and he's now in our program. And, we recently had an event and we had 4 generations of our students, and this is our 5th year, and they were I have 4 generations to be able to snap a picture. And I think that says more about the community and the sense that the students have of we are doing this, why they're doing it, that it matters, and then looking for ways to infuse that across the curriculum. So not just in CTE, but how do we infuse this into our ELA classrooms? How do we infuse this into our math classes? How do we reach across and create opportunities like these? And it doesn't have to be, like I said, it started with us with just throwing stuff in the back of the car. It doesn't have to start with the Cadillac model. Actually, I think more often it's those small natural moments that arise that we then identify ways to do this.
Well, Dr. Palladino, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I thank you for joining me. Is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about yet, something that's on your mind?
No, I don't think so. I think one of the things I have really gained through this Teacher of the Year process, part of which is getting to be a member of the South Carolina Teacher of the Year Forum, is that we have really looked at our why. And so I think for young educators, just that message of teach your why. So really think about, why am I doing what I do? And let that be the piece that underlines every day. Because we all know there's going to be good days, and we all know there's going to be days we're struggling. Yeah. And there are some of those things we just can't take away. But if behind them we have that piece of, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm serving my students by doing that. And at least for me and for a lot of educators that I've met that have been in education and have stayed in education, that's what sustains us.
Awesome. Well, once again, Dr. Palladino, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And you're being named Teacher of the Year for 2027 for South Carolina. Again, a remarkable accomplishment. And we thank you for joining us. And look forward to learning more from you and seeing you on the road. And hopefully we'll see you at our annual conference in February. We'll follow up with you about that.
Fantastic.
We'll love to have you be a part of that. And you'll have that opportunity to talk to school board members. So thank you for joining us today, and congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right.
And that's it for this episode of The Voice for School Boards. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and we'll see you soon.